Meanwhile, something that Charlie Gasparino and I follow very, very closely, the comings and goings in the White House. Look who's showing up for Lunchy Poo. Governor Christie, his wife Mary Pat, meeting with President Trump. Now, this is an interesting development in the fact that Mary Pat is joining him, because we were told he did have his pick of a couple of cabinet positions or sub-cabinet positions. I don't know what the truth was, but that Mary Pat wasn't keen on those offerings, or certainly uprooting the family from New Jersey to go to Washington for that. Now, if this is a sign to win her over or woo her for something that might be more meaningful, anyone's guess. But I pass that along because I oftentimes think it's very significant when the spouse comes along. There's Charlie Gasparino, who's back from, you okay? The voice is
I'm back. Got my voice back.
All right, what a party it must have been for your wife.
I know. The whole neighborhood was happy.
Yeah. You don't hear him. What do you make of this? What's going on here?
Listen, it's no doubt that, Reince Priebus, his chief of staff, is, at least among the Washington talking heads, is coming under some degree of pressure. People are openly questioning whether he's right for the job,
right.
Whether he's doing a good enough job. I would just point out this. I think you can appoint Jesus Christ to that job, and they wouldn't have done a great job. Why is that? Trump has a very horizontal management
Jesus
structure.
would have a different management style.
Well, he'd just go like this, and shit would happen. But, I'm just telling you that if you think about it, Trump has a horizontal management structure. There's no real chief of staff.
All things Trump.
Right, and they all fight amongst themselves. Right. The chief of staff really is not empowered to keep everybody in line.
Here's what weirded people out, though, because you have Bannon in this chief strategist role that might be kind of
like a chief of staff.
Right.
Wasn't it that Jared Kushner is an advisor, and who knows who he reports to.
Right.
So Priebus has a very difficult job. Amid that, you're bringing in somebody who's always been talked about as a potential chief of staff, Chris Christie, the New Jersey governor. I can't imagine he's just going to blow out Priebus now. Maybe he puts him into another advisory role. But I think
you think there's going to be a job offer out of this?
I think Trump thinks he needs a stronger hand in the White House to manage things.
Could you imagine if he were a press spokesperson?
It'd be great. By the way, he'd be a good chief of staff. Priebus would be a good chief of staff if Donald Trump empowered him to be the chief of staff. And I think this is what comes back.
You just hit on it. That job and your success is determined by your boss.
Right, and it's circular in this sense. Priebus is not given the power to keep the trains running, to herd the cats. And, whoever's in that job is going to face the same problem, that you have 15 chief of staffs, or actually 5. I mean, I can name a couple of them. Jared Kushner, Steve Bannon, Reince Priebus, and a few others. They're there, his kids to a certain extent. I mean, this is
it can be problematic. And I'm thinking, I was talking to Karl Rove, who was saying there was an understanding between he and Andy Card, who came in, that, look, there's a protocol here. You better honor the protocol. But then someone who's been a confidant from like year one or the beginning of your campaign or prior, they're not going to answer the protocol.
Yeah, and that's the problem, that it's so disoriented and dispersed. Listen, what was the problem? I hate to keep bringing this back to Scaramucci. What was his main problem? I don't believe it was this Chinese company. It was speaking at a turn at Davos, tweeting stuff, talking about all this crazy stuff, where Priebus tried to said, okay, enough is enough. We don't need some guy who's like the special liaison to the president to be talking about all these different issues outside of the control of me. And he has every right to do that.
And if you think of ones who've been rewarded in this administration, they didn't speak a lot.
No, and I'm telling you, when you have Gary Cohn as a potential chief of staff, as NEC chairman.
He's rocketed up in influence here, hasn't he?
Listen, he's a tough, smart guy.
He's the economic council guy, right?
National, head of the NEC, National Economic Council.
How does that jibe with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin?
Well, theoretically, the way these meetings are run by the National Economic Council, because the Treasury Secretary is in that meeting, in the old days, some Treasury Secretaries would say, I want to be head of these meetings. I don't want the head of the NEC. Yeah. So Cohn didn't do that. Cohn said, I want to be head of these meetings. So in a sense, national economic policy is going to be set largely by Gary Cohn. There's a rumor going around that there's another separate cabinet post, Council of Economic Advisors, the one that Kudlow was going to get. That's no longer a cabinet post because of Gary Cohn. Gary Cohn has nixed that as a cabinet post, further consolidating his
Real quick, because I know you ran, I wanted to pick your brand on this. Kevin Brady, the House Ways and Means Chief, was telling me, Neil, we are looking at big sweeping tax cuts. We're going to marry it with corporate tax reform. We're going to get this done this year. If it gets done before the summer, It would be retroactive. It's pushed into the fall. It would be the point of approval.
Right.
It will be simple majority, and it will get done. And I think that is a big reason why Wall Street has never looked back.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt that they are banking on significant corporate tax reform, particularly corporate tax reform, but they want some individual tax reform and regulatory reform. Here's the one fly in that ointment. If you have a dysfunctional White House where stuff gets bottled up because there's 20 chiefs of staff, that may not happen till the second part of the year, and that could be problematic.
Yeah, without naming names outside of Brady, that is their biggest fear.
That's their fear.
That it crumbles in the White House.
Look at
the
it.
Kicker.
They can't get anything done.
All right, buddy, I'm glad you're better. I'm glad you're back. Not the same without you.
Thank you.